Dr. X's Word Salads, How to Smoke a Consultant Psychiatrist Out of His Conversational Cubbyholes by Billy Bumbo. Word salad is a circular conversation to avoid the real topic. Tracy A. Malone. Dr. X, my psychiatrist, is the king of word salads, a condition of his nerdery, I suspect. No shade there. It's not news to say I consider myself a nerd, but pussyfooting around all discussions of my psychiatric diagnosis is both inappropriate and an abomination, as it pertains to my liberty. I want him to say it with his chest as to why he believes that my psychiatric diagnosis, that of paranoid schizophrenia, is fair, and therefore I want him to stand 10 toes down on why he still mandates that I must be injected with his snake oil drugs. It took him 8 months to accept the science, specifically the lack thereof, with which I provided him on the illegitimacy of paranoid schizophrenia as a psychiatric diagnosis. Yet he's still inexplicably white, knuckling the mandate of medication, on the twerp technicality of drug discontinuation relapse rates, as if he's never heard of hyperbolic tapering. Like, how inept and inhumane can you be when you've got someone's liberty in your hands? Like Donald Trump would never. Well, Billy, as you know, this is your CPA, and as you like to lead your CPAs, so over to you, said Sheila. Sure, it's fairly simple. Charles came with some new intel last week, which was quite peculiar to say the least. In his conclusions of our therapeutic relationship, he described me as being obnoxious, I said. That's a bit straightforward, said Sheila. It is, which makes it peculiar because that's not language that's endemic to healthcare professionals, to be so verbose and hyperbolic in their opinions. Now, within the bounds of my therapeutic relationship with Charles, this is perfectly acceptable as far as I'm concerned. You know I make myself very clear in my opinions about you guys, as you will be aware of in my blog, I said. Oh yes, I'm a snitch, said Sheila. Somebody's got to be in her bonnet. Yeah, indeed, we can come back to that. And so turnabout is alright as far as I'm concerned, as long as you can justify it. As is evident in my blog, I'm prone to indulging in what I would term hyperbolic eloquence, or vulgar eloquence even. But that's just my opinion, which is to say that there is more than one truth, and I'm certainly not obnoxious enough to believe that my opinion is the only one that counts. Hence why I give people the opportunity to give feedback, whether it's here in these meetings or on my blog. So that being said, it was a case of we didn't get to a place where we understood why he believed what he believed, but it was interesting nonetheless in terms of his succinctness as a healthcare professional, and I appreciate it. I don't believe it, but I appreciate it. At this stage in my life, I feel I'm extremely aware of who I am, so that being said, there is no part of me that condones his opinions on that basis, and so onwards, basically. I guess for me it's something that I will explore in my next blog on the 31st of December, next Wednesday, and why I believe he's wrong in his opinions. But I'm curious as to whether you, Dr. X, Sheila and Angela would agree with his opinions at this stage. Angela, you don't know much about me at this stage, so it's probably a bit unfair of me to expect you to form conclusions so early, but I'm still curious. Charles's succinctness was a diplomatic dig at Dr. X, which is to say, this was a Trojan horse designed to get Dr. X to speak his frigging mind already. I appreciate Charles's no-nonsense language. It makes a pleasant change from trying to get Dr. X to nail his colours to the mast with regard to his every utterance on psychiatric diagnosis. Okay, I mean, it's not a term I would use, and I think you're quite strident in your opinion. Obviously, I think it's fair to say I don't appreciate all of the commentary that is made on your blog, and I think some of it isn't what I would say is constructive, I suppose. But I mean, I think that's what we're going to discuss, isn't it? I mean, I think I'll be happy to say what I feel about it, said Dr. X. Feel free, I said. I think we've had a difficult relationship, haven't we? And I suppose I'd say if Charles is saying he finds you obnoxious, I would prefer to say I find, you sometimes rather difficult to find a common ground with, but we've been trying very hard. I'm sure you feel at times that, well, he's not really listening to what I'm saying. I'm sure you feel that sometimes I feel, right, you haven't really explored what I've said rather than just come back and say, but this is my opinion, if you see what I mean. But I mean, I'm expecting it to be challenging because you've got a strong view which you firmly hold, and it's about yourself, so why wouldn't you have a strong view about it? I've got this legal role as a clinical supervisor, which isn't what you'd want it to be. I think you'd prefer if I engaged with you entirely empathically and took your point of view, said Dr. X. Trying to hide behind a legal technicality is how you get sweaty palms, which is to say that legal technicality still requires him to do his job and justify his psychiatric diagnosis. For decades, psychiatrists have been figuratively mincing up and down the catwalk of people's precious lives, doling out diagnoses and drugs like confetti, even though there are no biomarkers to vindicate said diagnosis. Simply put, he is being negligent in fulfilling his legal role as clinical supervisor, but I digress. But I think there's going to be an inherent problem with our relationship, and I'm not sure how overcomable that is because of this legal role that I have essentially. And you've sort of pushed me into wanting to be something else, which I suspect you think, well, I'm just choosing not to, and of course that's another perspective, isn't it? And I suppose with my background and conditioning that I think you're saying, well, you say you can't, but you just won't. Is that fair? But anyway, that's kind of a perspective on it, said Dr. X. Sheesh, these word salads are both exhausting and exasperating. The role of clinical supervisor does not prevent you from doing your job. All he need do is cue wit hiding, get out of his own way and do the job. Sheila, I said, I don't think you're obnoxious, I think you're forthright in your views. I think you can be quite derogatory to either of us, but then that's because you think differently from how we think, said Sheila. It's not that they think differently from me, it's that the way Dr. X thinks is blatantly irrational, and you're choosing to ride in his circus of absurdity. When you believe in a scientifically specious psychiatric diagnosis, don't expect the service user to kowtow. I will just say I was a bit gobsmacked with you thinking I was a snitch because I don't always send the emails on to Dr. X and Charles, and you thought I was sending them on a risk basis, which actually isn't the case. It's that if I read it and I've got free time, I'll forward it, but if something else takes over, it goes out of my head, so I was a bit shocked at that, but hey-ho, said Sheila. Hey-ho indeed. Though I am not mandated to do so, from day one I afforded Dr. X, Charles and Sheila access to my blog. Therefore, there is no need for healthcare professionals to attempt to score brownie points by snitching about what is being said about them. If they want to read this blog, there's a red carpet signposting the way to https://billybumbo.substack.com for each and every one of them. Snitching is simply disingenuous and only reflects how Sheila thinks and feels about me. Okay, I guess for me it's a case of, as I've said before, my blog is a series of snapshots, so we can get lost in the weeds or we can keep moving, and for me it's a moving target. I make a certain assertion or a certain opinion known, and then there is the opportunity for critique as far as I'm concerned, I said. I suppose for the most part our discussions are reasonably personable face to face, but the blogs are more challenging. Generally speaking, I think... Is that fair to say? So, I just wondered whether Charles was thinking about your blog self, as it were. And, well, I mean, I think you have said before that it is an act of creativity. Like, there's a persona behind that, if you see what I mean. A blogging persona, said Dr. X. To a degree, I said. A somewhat difference of the self and approach, and I suppose that it's useful to understand that and what you mean by that, said Dr. X. Well, it's like I said at the beginning of this session, I indulge in hyperbolic eloquence in the Billy Bumbo space, and so it is going to cause consternation, it is going to be egregious, it is going to be wow. But basically, the essence of what I say is what I believe at that point in time. This is a therapeutic relationship, and this goes for you as well, Angela. It's a moving target. It's ever evolving. It has the opportunity to change, I said. I mean, for my own sort of understanding of it, Charles said obnoxious. Did you have a chance to sort of respond to that? Said Dr. X. Yeah, I did. I basically said, what you call obnoxious, I call charisma. We didn't go into the whys and wherefores, and in hindsight that's probably something that should have happened at that point in time, but given that the relationship was coming to an end, I was a little bit nonplussed with biting on his barb, I said. There are occasions where even I can be confrontation averse, or, more specifically, not give a shit about what they think of me. Oh, okay, said Dr. X. But yeah, the thing is, when your hands are tied, as mine are in this predicament that I find myself, when you feel like you're screaming into a glass bell when nobody hears you, then you have to find ways and means of reasoning with your reality, and to that end my blog is a therapeutic outlet, and it allows me to make peace with myself and with my circumstances. So that fundamentally is what drives what you're reading. That fundamentally is driving what you find derogatory. That fundamentally is what drives what you find challenging, I said. So if I did find something derogatory, if we talk hypothetically before we start doing it in real life, as it were, what would your response to that be? Would you think, well, that's his real experience of it, or would you say he's misunderstood? And if I said, what you said about me there was derogatory and not very helpful, would you think, well, you've misunderstood what I was writing about? Said Dr. X. Well, no, because first I would want to establish why you find it derogatory, what parts are making you feel the way you feel, and then it would be a case of exploring what you mean and what I mean. It's about finding common ground. Fundamentally, it's not nearly as insidious as it seems, I said. No, I don't think it seems insidious. I'm just aware I don't want it to become, and I'm sure it won't. That's not your intention to, descend into name-calling, as it were, isn't it? That's what I need to guard against, but I take from what you're saying that that isn't the process either, and you would guard against that also. said Dr. X. Apart from the mansplaining, there it is, the infantilizing tenet of his philosophy. From one perspective, he is nervous about me, figuratively or potentially literally ripping him a new arsehole. From another, he's guarded because that's the low level of esteem in which he holds me. This perfectly exemplifies why he is clueless about me as a human being. If he has no idea how I behave in confrontations, how can he profess to be capable of making an informed psychiatric diagnosis? This is peak professional incompetence, but it also explains his kid glove approach to psychiatry. It seems he too is confrontation averse, even when it is healthy confrontation. Again, no shade for that, but then how does that balance with something as nebulously subjective as psychiatric diagnosis? Does psychiatry not exist in the grey? It's all too apparent why psychiatrists prefer asymmetric therapeutic relationships that insidiously skew in their favour. It also explains why he's been fannying around for so long, as it pertains to explaining why he believes in a psychiatric diagnosis that has no known scientific provenance, and thus why he refuses to mandate the rescission of his snake oil medication. It's so much more than that. The idea that I am simply descending into name-calling is highly reductive, not just to the blog, but to me as a person, I said. No, I'm not saying that's what the blog is. I'm saying a process of engaging, and as you say, I am being reductive, but one has a concern that it will lose any therapeutic engagement given the emotions attached to it, but we will see, said Dr. Exton. Either he fears he won't be able to control his ire, or he fears I won't be able to control my ire. If the latter is true for him, all he need be mindful of is an intellectual debate based on the facts. This is a diplomatic street fight, which is to say this will not be no holds barred, so no name-calling. But while I will not be pulling any punches, the gloves are off. Why wouldn't they be? Morally speaking, I'm convinced I can play by the rules and still win this fight with one hand tied behind my back. Indeed we will. I feel like it's open season, and on that basis we move. But I'm not standing still. My opinions are open to judgment, and they're open to changing. Like I said in our email exchange last week, the fact that you made what might be considered a Freudian slip when you made a typo that inferred you would tell me how to think doesn't reflect poorly on you. In fact, it reflects favourably on you in that you can make a mistake and hold your hands up. That's how I see it. And at no point did I think he's taking a piss here. Because the reality is that just as you are able to make mistakes, as I have, and that is the whole concept of being human. So that brings us back to the whole issue of psychiatric diagnosis, and the fallout from being human as far as I'm concerned, I said. What followed was maybe 10 seconds of tumbleweed. He knows I've got his number on the matter of psychiatric diagnosis. He is in the business of dehumanizing his service users. Like, Billy can no longer control his emotions, so drug him. It truly is the height of propaganda psychiatry, and I will be holding him to account for such specious psychiatry from here on out. Just to say, what I understood from what Dr. Charles was saying is he was explaining that sometimes some people might describe you as obnoxious because he was trying to explain to me that I have to think about context. I have to understand where you're coming from, but that's just what I got from it, said Angela. She's right. That was indeed the context in which Charles was trying to seed our therapeutic relationship, but it is a context within which he was prepared to accept an opinion from his peers as truth, which fundamentally undermines said context. Which is to say, if Charles were to accurately explain the context, then he should have been prepared to accept the fact that his predecessors, who propagated this propaganda, were narcissistic snowflakes. That would have been a more accurate context to present to Angela and me. Indeed, he alluded to this truth from his own experience as someone who is also black in Britain, yet he still chooses to sully my doorstep with a slur like obnoxious. Well, I welcome debate about such barbs, but if you're going to tell the truth, tell the whole truth. He might consider himself to be obnoxious in the face of the microaggressions associated with being black in Britain, but as a service user, I do not see myself as someone in possession of that privilege, so I, mindfully, do not engage in such pernicious behaviour. Nonetheless, it's Christmas, and I'm no Grinch, which is why I gave Dr. X and Sheila some wrapped gifts, and you'll be forgiven for thinking I'm suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, but my gifts most assuredly have strings attached. I gave Dr. X a copy of the excellent The Contortionist's Handbook by Craig Clevenger and a copy of Crossing Zero, The Art and Science of Coming Off and Staying Off Psychiatric Drugs by Anders Sørensen, PhD. I sourced Craig Clevenger's book from my local bookshop in line with my socialist values. Unfortunately, that same bookshop couldn't source Anders Sørensen's book, so I had to sell out on my socialist values and buy it from Amazon. Since Sheila participated in my CPA via Zoom, I gave Dr. X a seashell keychain that I purchased from a local business or my peer to pass on. Angela also attended my CPA via Zoom, so I told her she would get her present at our next in-person meeting. Again, another thoughtful gift with an ulterior motive, a copy of Drop the Disorder by Joe Watson. IYKYK. That way, none of them can play the dumb dictator with me in 2026. Like I said, Donald Trump would never. As ever, all views are appreciated. Feel free to let me know how you feel in the comments. This blog is currently free to read, but it's also how I hope to pay all of my bills. If you have any suggestions or feedback on how I can earn your paid subscription, you're welcome to speak your mind. billybumbo123@gmail.com. And if this is too big of a commitment, I'm always grateful for a smoothie. https://ko-fi.com/billybumbo.